It's 9:05 a.m., March 22nd, 2024. Called on this Budget Finance Administrative Committee meeting, budget workshop. Moment of silence, please. Mr. Root?
Yes, sir. Pray with me if you'd like to. Dear Father, thank you for this new day, this new opportunity, just a new beginning, and all the things that a new day holds, and the opportunity to be good stewards, and for the council to shepherd the county's resources wisely. So I pray this morning that you help in that task, that you give them your guidance and your insight, and Ms. Brock as well. Make this to be a good meeting, and the budget to be a solid budget. In your name I pray, amen.
Mr. Biden, will you lead us in the pledge?
I sure will.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve the March 5th, 2024 regular minutes?
Make motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
That is 4-0.
Okay, discussion items, fiscal year 2024-25 budget discussion and workshop. Before we start with Ms. Brock, I understand we have a $1.3 million shortfall in our health insurance reserve. So to me, that's a budget increase of $1.3 million mandatory. And then last year, if you remember, back in the 80s, Ross Perot had a voodoo stick. But we used a voodoo stick for the budget this past year and approved 2/3 salary, 1/2 salary. We gotta fully fund that this year. That's another close to $1 million. So we're looking at least a $2.3 million mandatory budget increase before Ms. Brock says it. So just remember that. Ms. Brock?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Budget, Finance, and Administration Committee. Good morning. Happy Friday. I think everybody's got a little sniffle, so forgive us if we're sounding a little nasally this morning. Glad to see the rain come, even though the rain does get to us sometimes. I don't have the clicker because I am not. There we are. Okay. Nope. Hold on, Jen. Aha. So we have a long written agenda. I don't anticipate the meeting to be until 2 this afternoon. I hope it's okay that we go to about 1:30. That's a joke. I understand they're supposed to be funny to be considered jokes. I'll work on that. So the vision and mission of Oconee County. Oconee County, a diverse, growing, safe, vibrant community guided by rural traditions and shaped by natural beauty, where employment, education, and recreation offer a rich quality of life for all generations, both today and tomorrow. The county's mission statement is as follows. It is the mission of Oconee County to provide our current and future citizens and visitors quality services while protecting our communities, heritage, environment, and natural resources in an ever-changing world. We try to keep the vision and mission on the front page of everything that we do. That's our why. That's the bus, that's our vehicle, that's why we do what we do, and that providing of service is one of the county's top priorities. So we're going to go through the departmental budget request, but I want to mention a caveat first. None of this budget is balanced for the 10 fund. The departmental request, as you see on the document here, and there's 2 pages of them, is not a recommended budget. You'll see on here, typically we have a recommended budget, but this budget is not balanced at this time. This is the first year departments have had to separate out items that would go into the other capital funds or the special revenue funds, and we are going through those with a fine-tooth comb. So there may be significant changes moving forward going to the special and capital revenue funds. The increases, and this year we also did a 3-year planning budget. So you see 24, 25, 26, and 27 up here. Obviously, we don't know what the year 2027 is gonna look like, but we're trying to lay down a path to create a plan moving forward so that we know what the outlay for each department is, what the needs will be, and utilities, water, sewer, garbage, office supplies, operational supplies for every department. We should have some idea of what those numbers look like. Obviously, there's increases in utilities and just increases across the board. I think the kicker here, though, is page 2. I have a pointer. I did have a pointer. So here, if you look on the bottom here, on the bottom of the second page, which is page 6 for everybody, the difference between the approved 2024 and the 2025 budget worksheet. I'm going from 56 million to 67. We will be sharpening our pencils. We will be combing through all of this. I don't want anyone to have any concern at this time because we haven't finished with the largest of the departments, the Sheriff's Office Detention Center, Fire and Emergency Services, anything related to public safety, because we want to be able to meet with those departments independently and individually to go through those. I have reached out to every department and said, hey, we need to trim this down just a little bit. So I don't want anyone to be alarmed at that, and I do want to state again, this is not balanced at this time. What is balanced and where we are a little ahead of the game and on the curve, and this is kind of opposite this year because typically in a normal budget year, the 10 fund is the easy one. The other funds are the more difficult ones because we try to squeeze in what we can. This year, because we have these designated and allocated funds for the Emergency Services Protection Fund, Sheriff's Fund, Solicitors Victim Services Fund, 911 Fund, Tri-County Tech, of course, Road Maintenance Fund, and the Community Health and Human Services, you'll see a lot of the things that you saw in the 10 fund budget, which is the general fund from previous years, rolling over into these designated funds. Anybody have a question yet? I always forget to ask. And if I'm talking too fast, I'm not trying to sell you a car. Emergency Services Fund, this is the 2.9 mils that is for the non-municipal rural fire service in Oconee County. As you'll see here, again, a 3-year plan. The only thing that was added this year is for data processing. The data processing is for reporting software. This is a county-wide reporting system. It also is partially funded in the 10 fund. So you'll have a portion of this funding paid for by 10 fund, which means to municipalities as well because they use the reporting software, and then the remainder of that goes over. This is general operations for the Emergency Services Fund, and you'll see the allocations for paving for the rural fire stations here as well. Sheriff's Victims Assistance Fund, no significant change here as well. You'll see a minor increase in the fund balance at the bottom. The general fund transfer, this is something I do like to point out to make sure everybody understands. That general fund transfer, just above the yellow line there in the middle, that is not a transfer from that fund, that's a transfer to that fund. The fund doesn't create enough off of the assessments to pay the salaries for the staff that's required. The Solicitors Victim Assistance Fund, again, general fund transfer, just making sure everybody understands that's a transfer to this fund, not from this fund. And if you'll see that the salaries and fringe require that transfer to be done. The 911 Communications Fund, this one is, of course, the restricted fund that is off the 911 surcharge. Once we get around to the one-time capital, you'll see some items that are for communications in 911. Those items cannot be paid for out of this special fund. Click. Oh, there we go. I wish Dr. DeHay was here this morning, so they haven't made their budget request, which is why it's in pink, the Tri-County Tech Fund. When's that one?
The 10th.
So we'll receive their budget request on April 10th. I will say, after speaking with him just a couple of weeks ago regarding the budget, I do not anticipate their request to be in excess of their millage allocation. Road Maintenance Fund, this one I'm kind of excited about. This is a fund we added a mill to this year. And if you'll see here, kind of in the middle, where it says road paving here, you'll see our actual was close to $300,000. This year, we're bumped it up to 1.8 million. That paving contract will be coming to council in the next 2 meetings. But beyond the 1.8, please look at years 25, 26, and 27. The 2.8, 2.8, 2.8, meaning that we will be expending an estimated $10 million in the next 3 years for road paving. And that is a significant investment, and the first time in at least as long as I've been here that this has been funded at this level.
So how many miles at the current prices does that pay?
I can't talk about that right now because the bid for the paving contract hasn't gone out. I don't want to make an estimation. In the past, for a repaving, it's been about $3.80 a mile, and it depends on if you do a 2-inch mill and overlay or an 1.5 inch patch and overlay. That's probably a good discussion item after the contract goes out for Transportation Committee. The other thing here, outside of this paving portion, is for the professional road inventory. I can point, but I can't. So this will be an ongoing process. There's a significant jump in that budget amount. It's under the professional road inventory. The county had a road inventory and a quote-unquote a road priority list. That priority list is outdated. And because the fund, the 2.1 mills years ago, didn't bring in enough in 1 year period to do an annual paving contract, that millage was allowed to keep a fund balance. And once that fund balance got to a certain point where enough roads could be done to where put it out to bid, so it would be like once every 3 years. That road inventory will be key to the paving contract. So year 1, you'll do an inventory and it'll be on the next year's contract. Then year 2, you'll do another inventory and a priority list, and it'll be on the next year's contract. So this is setting up a system to where you can maintain them. You won't be coming out from the negative or have so many years where the paving. Now, we typically do maintenance, patching, all of that on a regular schedule. But the paving contract has been an every other year or every 3rd year process typically. Any questions on road maintenance? I know this one's significant because it did come up as council priority 3rd year in a row. That funding, the additional mill, and the growth of the value of the mill. And you'll see here, we've been pretty conservative about the estimated value of a mill, only going up about 10,000. If the economy happens to slow down, these numbers should be relatively in line. This is a new fund for this year, so we put prior years here. Whoops. We put prior years in a race car. There we go. We put the prior years here. They were in the general fund, they were in the 10 fund, but we wanted to ensure that you were able to compare apples to apples and that there was no significant increase or money moved from one place to another. Obviously, this fund covers all health and human services related to the county as a whole. These were previously in Department 705, along with some other various things, but cleaning the funds up should allow for there to be a steadfast way of looking backwards and forwards as you both review and plan for a budget. The fire contracts are here, the AOP, mental health, senior solutions at Lakeview, Oconee support. The one indicator here I do want to include is the CAT bus. That is a grant that the city of Seneca has for the operation of the CAT bus. I reached out to Scott Mulder yesterday. I did not include it in here. I'm not certain if that's going to be a requirement this year. If it is a requirement, it will be added back in. So it wasn't just cut. I wanted y'all to know that. Questions on Health and Human Services? I guess on this one, the one other thing I do want to bring up, so we understand that the cost of running an ambulance service for the hospital is significant. So you will see an increase over the years to Prisma Health, and that is for ambulance service for the whole county. It's not a payment to the hospital. These are capital, y'all want to talk about the special revenue funds? Any questions, comments, discussion? Okay. Capital projects funds typically are designated millage funds. Obviously, for capital projects, capital means anything large. You'll see some changes here too, and there are a couple things I just want to bring to everyone's attention because it does tell a story. First is the Economic Development Capital Projects Fund. Obviously, this one is for economic development. If you'll see here, the highlighted portion, we don't typically put out county named or owned projects. So for economic development, the first one for professional, obviously I do believe that we'll be bringing back some additional grading for Golden Corner on that. But if there are additional economic development ventures, those will come to council during executive session. There was an increase this year in this account also of $1 million. And if you'll note at the top, the RDA funds under the revenues for the rural RDA, that is for the sewer at exit 4. Questions, discussion? Okay, moving on to the Bridges and Culverts Fund. This fund, again, is one of the rolling capital funds. You'll see annually we collect $1 million. That $1 million in the next 3 years will allow for the replacement of a bridge at Crestwood, a bridge and culvert replacement in 2026 at Armada Way, and a bridge and or culvert replacement, which is a larger one on year 27 at $930,000. Again, investing in that invisible infrastructure. Bridges and culverts can often go unnoticed as water and sewer does because it's not visible to the eye. Moving along to the Capital Equipment and Vehicle Fund. This one is the one I wanted to utilize as the example of why the funds are significant and important. If you'll notice the capital vehicle funding coming in this year, we did increase it by $0.3 million from last year. But if you'll look on that second page, here, is it in the backup? Yes. So the requests are high. The requests are all below what the anticipated collection and millage is going to be. But this fund, only 3 years old, is now capable of developing a fund balance. And that's important. So some of the other new funds, you look and you think, well, we expended all of it. We did. We're still buying equipment that we should have bought 10 years ago. We're still working on things from the past. But once a fund gets established and we meet the immediate needs, that fund is allowed to kind of balance out and start building a fund balance. You know, we've got some significant equipment purchases for solid waste that we need to be looking at, which we put under the one-time capital. Because that, you know, we discussed this before, the cost of the equipment, for especially the landfill equipment, is enough to wipe out this entire fund. The importance of it is, and the point, is that even though some of the other millage accounts have been broken out for current fiscal year, please keep in mind it's the first year for those funds. And just because every dime in those funds is expended, doesn't mean that that fund will never have a fund balance moving forward. This one is a prime example of what happens when you allow it to do its thing. And it's not going to happen in 1 year. It's simply not. But having a fund balance for years to come would allow for there to be longer range planning, more vehicle purchases. Like typically we buy 10 vehicles for the sheriff's office. This year, because the growth in the fund, we're allowed to buy 11 vehicles for the sheriff's office, and it makes a significant difference over time. Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Fund. This one we decreased by 0.3 mils current year, sorry, Phil. To take that extra 3 and put it into the capital vehicles. And the argument there was that PRT, of course, and all the parks utilize the capital vehicle fund, not to punish them in any way. But when we saw the cars and trucks coming in on an 18-month delay and a $10,000 price increase, we realized that we needed additional fund. At some point, we might add millage back to the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Fund. But that's that difference there, and in the highlighted portion, we got an error on here. This one says economic development. So the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism, the annual allotments, of course, again, based on that conservative millage, are the projects that you all approve as they come up. Questions, comments, concerns on this fund? Make a note on that one. Thank you. Another new fund. Prior years were in general fund. You see nothing because they weren't funded. That's why I wanted to talk about the importance of allowing these funds to get some time under them so that they can start building that fund balance. It's very difficult to put that sort of funding in a general fund if there's a fluctuation in economy, if the needs of departments are great, if we have to have a CAT 973 for the landfill, if we have to have this. It's very difficult for a council or administrator to balance out $1 million or $2 million for every year for fire department needs. And 20 years ago when we did the lease on the fire trucks, we did them all at one time, which means they were all aging at the same time, and we found ourselves at a critical place. 3 years ago, we did another lease for 6 fire trucks.
Seems like it's longer, about
4
3 or
years?
4 maybe, yeah,
Time flies.
it does.
Time flies. But look at this. We're not buying 6, 8, and 10 at a time. We're buying one this year, one the next year, one the next year, one the next year, giving us the ability to step and provide ourselves that next year's adequate funding. Now, could this funds be combined and go into a lease and do 4 if you got 4 for the price of 3 over the period of time? Absolutely, it could, but it couldn't have happened if this didn't exist. And here's the backup for the Fire and Emergency Services Fund. Again, you're not going to see a fund balance grow in this fund, not for several years. The general capital request, which we kind of slangily in-house call one-time capital, this is a 2-pager this year. This is not in the order that department submitted it, so if there's any department here that sees an item on this that is not in the way you submitted it, it's because we try to balance the years out a little better. We took everybody's one-time capital request and kind of divided out the allocations for each year and such. I have one thing highlighted here for the $175,000. This is for the new financial software system upgrade that can be used by every single department. We currently operate under a really archaic, very difficult to use system called, am I supposed to say the system name? Probably not, I don't want to dog them out. But it's very old and archaic. Departments can't use it on their own. So all budgeting requests, all budget reports have to come to finance. The finance staff has to do that work and then send it back out. It's just not very modernized. It's highlighted because we don't know now today if that's going to remain in this budget year or move to the next budget year. In the event that that stays in current budget year, the sheriff's key access that is on the next year, 2025 for 175, will remain in the next year. If not, so the financial software doesn't come, we move the financial software to year 26, and we move the sheriff's key entry over. We are currently working on the water heater. That may come off entirely. Good. Do we have questions about one-time capital? Do y'all want to talk about the things on one-time capital?
So So the 175 for the ERP system, does that include implementation or is that just the software
That's implementation, which
and
is,
training?
oh, yes. Yes. And on the IT side, on the bottom, the cybersecurity and the Palo Alto, that is one of those other things that we consistently have to upkeep, maintain, get trained, stay very alert and aware. AI has become, it's found its way into the bot server systems, and I have to give a lot of kudos to my IT staff. They're typically on the ball all the time.
Have there been any cyber attacks that you know of in South Carolina, any of the counties this year?
Not that I'm aware of, no, sir. I know there was 2 in Georgia. 2 in Georgia. And one of them didn't have any ransomware, it just shut the entire system down for 4 days. There was no ransomware request. It's funny, because that seems like yesterday, too. It was a rough few days. Another thing to bring up under this one specifically is if you'll start to look like facilities maintenance and solid waste. A lot of this is maintenance. And I bring up the top one specifically, the facilities maintenance, because you'll see several items under the courthouse. Had we expended those kinds of funds on the old courthouse, we would have never had a discussion to demo it. This is another important thing to bring up. I was happy to show y'all the fund balances of the capital vehicle and equipment. Again, I want you to look at the shortfalls here on the bottom for the capital request. Those shortfalls are not necessarily the end of the world. It may mean that we need to reallocate different funds in future years to meet the needs or the requirements of the business of running a county. But the fund being brand new didn't have a fund balance coming in. So I don't want anyone to be upset that there isn't going to be a fund balance. The funds are doing their work, you just have to give them time to do it. Can I speak to Mr. Hart? We'll wait on you, Mr. Hart. And the enterprise fund, this is the rock quarry fund. This one obviously is not any amount of tax dollar. If you'll see the bottom here, and if y'all want to go through this line by line, that's totally fine. I think the significant thing is that we start looking at the bottom here, so we transfer back to the general fund. 1 year we tipped it at $1 million. We're still transferring money out of the rock quarry to help supplement, but we have allocated an additional $250,000 for a land acquisition fund. The land acquisition fund, as Mr. Mize, I believe that was your committee last week. Was it? We had 2 committee meetings. Yes, it was. You saw how quickly we're going through the land at the quarry. Our 32-year plan, we're 18% ahead on almost annually. So putting money in that land acquisition fund puts us in a better place when it's time to purchase or consider purchasing more land for the continuation of the rock quarry. And finally, the debt service fund. This one's tiny print because there's a lot of things on here. I do want to go over the principal payments, interest payments, insurance costs, and final. If you'll notice on the bottom here, the debt service fund, oops. Sorry, Jen. I don't know how I did that.
What page?
The last one.
28.
Oh, yeah. They're page numbers. Awesome. Thank you. So if you look across the bottom, the total debt service expenditures actually go down. Because the county is in such good financial position and had previous debts here that will be rolling off, you'll see years where there will be no debt in that line item, no debt in that line item. This is like shooting the ducks at the fair with a water gun. As long as those other debts continue to roll off, and they will, you'll have 2 primary debts to pay for, and that will be the bond and any other ancillary debt related to construction of the detention center, which is the next one that'll be, large one that'll be coming off. But if you look at that debt service, those payments go down over time. And we will wrap it up with questions and discussion.
Questions?
I got some discussions. In light of what happened at Seneca in the rec department, and us putting $50,000 in it, and I read somewhere that they were out $400,000. How much of that is the taxpayers of Oconee County replacing? Also, I got a call from one of the members of the Farm Bureau saying there's no transparency in the farm center on 123. And he made accusations that one of the members of the board relatives did somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000 and it wasn't bidded out. It was just a good old boy system. And again, like I say, anything that we own, the property, and it's being leased, I think that we need to audit those books too, because I understand that there was one of the individual people, not necessarily the people, but the I won't call the name of it, that has money in the bank, but they come to the county and ask to borrow toilet paper so they don't have to spend their own money. That fella evidently must be a conservative to the 10th degree. That's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Anybody else have discussion regarding the budget? Any of the funds, questions?
Not yet.
As I said, the general fund is gonna take a lot more work. We've got meetings scheduled, I think, for the next 2 weeks. It's not balanced today. It's probably not gonna be balanced by the end of next week, but we are working on it, diligently working on it, and we'll bring back recommendations regarding any amendments we may need there.
When's your next budget meeting?
I didn't bring my
The
calendar.
16th, is that correct? April?
April 16th.
We still got plenty of time.
Yes. April 16th also, during the Budget Finance Committee Administration meeting, Grant will be here for the audit. Audit books are on your desks. You can welcome to go through them, look at the balance sheets, all the information that you need. If you have questions, obviously you can reach out at any time, that Mr. Davis will be here. Grant Davis from our auditing firm will be here for the Budget Committee meeting on April 16th.
Is that a before council meeting?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
4:30 meeting, right?
It is the 4:30 PM meeting, that's correct.
Any other questions or discussion?
I do have one, and it's just because I'm not sure where it's at. Is there any funding in here for the farm center? Because I know I'm gonna get asked that.
No, sir.
No funding.
No, sir.
Okay.
I want y'all to keep in mind too that the general fund, the numbers for the general fund do not include any new position requests. As you all know, we are in the, I'd say, final third for the comp and wage study. At this time, I'm telling departments we're sitting on all requests until we get the comp and wage study back, because that comp and wage study will tell us if we're short or over. There may be a need for us to consider the departments. In fact, there will be a need for us to consider departments that were not included, which includes public safety and fire. We all know that there's a shortage of officers and firefighters, and those will probably be put in the first round of recommended budget. But for the remainder of the departments, because we are going through a comp and wage study, we will be waiting on the results for that.
Got any folks here in the building that wants to become a sheriff's officer or a firefighter?
I tried, but the sheriff wouldn't let me.
You could go undercover.
He's seen me
Yes.
drive. I'm just kidding.
And he saw the way you shoot too, so.
True.
Any other questions, discussions? If not. is there
I
a
make a
motion?
motion that we adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.